Welcome to Finding Humans in Tech, where we uncover the extraordinary stories behind the technology shaping our world. This isn't just about innovation, it's about the people, the dreamers, the doers, and the changemakers, whose journeys remind us that humanity is the soul of every breakthrough. Get ready to be inspired, to connect, and to celebrate the resilience and passion that drive the tech community forward. Let's dive into the stories that prove technology is nothing without the humans behind it. Some art transcends time, some art change history, and some art achieve immortality. The Ukrainian national icon, poet, and artist Taras Shevchenko's works and poems have resonated through the ethos of his nation for centuries. Once more, the poet's beloved country is at a test of fate, and the people once again find themselves fighting for their right to exist. His works hold the key to what Ukraine, a faraway land in Eastern Europe, symbolizes for its citizens. An excerpt from the poet Taras Shevchenko's Zapovit, translation by John Weir. When I am dead, then bury me in my beloved Ukraine, my tomb upon a grave mound high amid the spreading plain, so that the fields, the boundless steppes, the Dnieper's plunging shore, my eyes could see, my ears could hear, the mighty river roar. A nation can only be as great as its citizens, and the past few weeks have only shown us how. Sometimes in the darkest of days and the most turbulent of times, people find the strength and resolve to stand up for what's right. And this was a promise that a nation and its free men were going to keep to stand up for Pravda, the truth and nothing else. So this is a promise we are keeping too, to be on the right side of history, to use our words and voices to bring forth a story of a gallant nation and one of its citizens who has made the same promises to someday be able to tell and show his children what their Tato's home was like. So here's introducing our next human in the series, the alluring Rostyslav Danylenko from Ukraine, the land of indomitable people and undaunting spirit, who found the freedom to create through art and has become a passionate proponent in using art to advocate for anti-war campaigns. It was Christmas in 1991 when the USSR flag came down for the first time in the Kremlin and signified the end of an era and the start of a new world order. Ross recalls the effect of the early 20th century's changing political systems across the world with the fall of the Berlin Wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union around him. The place he calls home, Dnipro, was one of the thriving space research centers in the Cold War era. Like most people in the town, his father was an engineer with a degree in rocket systems, and his mom was a librarian. The home he grew up in was a unique amalgamation of science and arts. His early years were marred by the tough times Ukraine had to endure as the country had to rebuild itself after the Cold War ended. A brief period of instability, disorder, and miscreant activities were on the rise. He contemplates and says it was a very difficult time. He recalls how his father found himself out of a job, as nobody would hire a rocket engineer in those times. His Tato had to learn the art of business to survive through that era. So the senior Mr. Danylenko had to reinvent himself as a businessman to support his family and eventually formed a company that sold metal goods. Dnipro in due course became one of the flourishing industrial cities of the country. The economic situation changed steadily over the next decade. He recalls the long queues in front of essential shops and markets. Austerity and surviving with the basic things they could acquire were the lessons learned during those difficult years. Things started to look up again in the 21st century as the economy opened up, creating an opportunity for Ukrainians to set up their own companies and businesses. Ross describes, "We realized how we could generate employment and provide job opportunities. We could own the things we create. The simplistic idea of ownership reflected the changing economic system the country was going through as it set its foot in the world of globalization. The decade-long struggle to make ends meet was officially over. The country had put itself on the global map as one of the largest producers of wheat grains, earning its title of the breadbasket of Europe and becoming an international destination for students worldwide. Its world-renowned medical universities offer a haven for quality education. Even his hometown was slowly getting back to its space-age heydays. The resilient citizens had rebuilt their country from the ashes. In remembrance of happier times, Rose recalls happier days in the Crimean Peninsula. The coastal towns flanked by the Black Sea were a vacation hotspot that the Danylenko family regularly visited. Its lush green forests and azure blue sea were a sight to behold. He tells me that one of his best memories of his childhood is when the whole family would hit the beaches and frolic around the sand, leaving all their worries behind. Those summer holidays were something he would anticipate, and he narrated to me how beautiful the historic place looked, frozen in time in his memories. In his youth, Ros had won 3 gold medals for the National Badminton Championships. He recalls heading to Poland and Hungary for open tournaments. Those were simpler times when he and his friends would gather in parks to talk about their dreams and lives. Disco fever had reached his homeland and gripped the youth back in his days too. He reflects on how Christmas is one of the most bustling and happening holiday seasons of the year. The date on which the locals celebrate the holiday depends on whom you ask. The various Orthodox and Greek Catholic churches follow either the Julian or the Gregorian calendar. So the 25th of December and 7th of January are considered Rizdvo or Christmas Day. Ros fondly recalls illuminated streets and ethereal koladki or carols and reveling in piping hot vareniki or dumplings on such occasions. The picture he paints of his homeland is something he wishes his 3 children would get to experience too. Here was a father desperately wanting to stop a war that could derail all he had worked for. Uncertainty for the future is what looms in the mind of every single Ukrainian today. There was once a fundamental question: what war conquers? And the answer was plain and simple: nothing. In conquering nothingness, the war destroyed cities and towns, separated families, made parents bury their children, and ended a future that could have existed, finding the freedom to create. He fondly recalls his babusia, giving his 3-year-old self a choice to take a nap or draw. The young boy would grab the crayons instead and start drawing what he saw around him. And his babusia was never far behind to encourage the tiny artist. However, art was not a domain with many takers in those days, and the tech industry had yet to see the boom of the 21st century. His love for art had to be kept on the back burner for a few years of his life. The medical institutions and healthcare sector were something the country had almost perfected. Thousands of international students flocked to these medical universities to earn their degrees. It was natural that Ros would also be inclined to complete his medical school. It was considered an honorable job, and he could help save lives. The artist had taken a back seat and was doing what he felt the world needed out of him. But there is a saying that what is meant to be will always find its way. He felt the need to be free. He wanted to create things and feel the world around him again. The white coat was compromise he thought he had to put up with. He watched the world slowly slip by each day in the hospital. He didn't want to end up in his last days in a hospital bed, regretting what he could have done. He was ready to pick himself up again and follow his dreams. He would claim, "All my life, I wanted to be a designer and create art." I had to ask him if there were any hurdles in the path he had now chosen for himself. He swiftly replies, "Tak." But he had kept his passion for art close to his heart for decades. If he didn't give it a shot this time, it would be for nothing. That's when he gleefully mentions his wife, the magnetic doctor, Alyona Marenko, who has been his greatest support system. They met in a hospital where they both had an internship. He proudly tells me she was one of the first medical professionals in her country to get a certification from the IBL-CE, International Board of Lactation Consultant Examiners. The brilliant Alyona was one of the first people to know about his plans to get into designing, and he remembers her telling him every day, "I believe in you and you can do it. Someday you will be a famous artist." She was one of the guiding forces that made him pick himself up in the initial days of learning to navigate through the design world. This wasn't just a union of love and unwavering faith. She was the constant light that shone through the good and the bad times. He would later confess that she had the most significant role in his achievements, and without her calming presence, things would have gone in a different direction. When I asked him what art represents to him, he lit up and told me, "I wanted to create art that can change lives." He marvels at how small details like buttons or color schemes can have such significant meaning to applications. He recalls his clients' experiences with different designs and themes and how they call him Mr. Problem Solver. They would bring in blank canvases and ideas, and he would hear them out and interpret it through his designs. He is still dazed by how these designs would go on to be used by billions worldwide. Art in any form or shape could indeed stir emotions. A simple button can bring so much joy, he reminisces. He admits how he feels the happiest when he sees how his designs have impacted his clients, and there was nothing more gratifying than knowing how his art could make an impression on people. That is one of the reasons why he strongly feels art can be used as a medium to highlight the truth happening in his homeland. He is using all the resources at his disposal to create applications that can be used by protesters across the world. Videos of heartbreaking ground realities have been circulated online to reveal the truth that the outside world rarely sees. He wants to see more protest movements across the globe and has been working day in and out to use art as a platform to help these protests. The world has to help us. Everybody has to know and see the truth, he asserts. He has started sharing videos made by his company on Patreon to illuminate the realities of war, using the medium of art and music to make the world see what is happening. Ross describes everyone around him is determined to save their homeland. We will fight back with whatever means we have, no matter what it takes. He recounts how every person back home contributed in some way or another. Everybody wanted to fight for what was right. The Molotov cocktails have become a symbol of resistance, led by people who choose to stand by and defend their homeland. It's the same spirit that bards and artists have highlighted in their works for centuries. Their unwavering resolve has indeed united a world regardless of our boundaries and distance. He remembers how his mother sobbed over the phone as they saw their precious Ploshcha Svobody, or Freedom Square, in Kharkiv, go up in flames. It was once a bustling and lively street, flanked by swarming cafes and restaurants. In a matter of seconds, the square was in ruins. It was like a foreboding of things to come over the next few weeks. Everything that the nation and its citizens had built over decades would come tumbling down before their eyes. For all the generations that had lived through the Soviet era and the 21st century, like the senior Mrs. Danylenko, this was like reliving the horrors of the past. Ross breaks down and tells me how he lives in fear each day when he calls home to check on the rest of his family members who couldn't make it out of the country on time. He fears for the people he knows back home, and each passing day brings news of another familiar face he would never get to see again. He tries to put on a show for the sake of his youngest children who don't yet understand what war entails. He would say, "I understand that I will never see them again in the future. I don't know what will be," as his voice trails off. He fears not just for his family, but for his children's future. His kids will grow up in a foreign land, not knowing the world they could have been in. Roz would lament, "We want a better future for our children." There is uncertainty in what the future holds for them, knowing how limited time is and how fragile life is. He fiercely states, "Mi ne хочемо бути в минулому." We don't want to be in the past. His words resonated through hallways with shattered window panes in empty schools. His words echoed through the corridors of wrecked hospitals and medical centers that have become overwhelmed with the increasing number of casualties. And his words reflected from the images of a city that is falling apart and its citizens battered and bruised yet, holding on gloriously for their right to live. So if you have never seen the place you call home destroyed in clouds of smoke, if you have never woken up to air raid sirens and held on for dear life, if you have never been evacuated in the middle of the night, if you have never seen young children and old retired veterans being led away to underground shelters, if you have never seen families separate to survive, if you have never been fearful of what the future holds as you see your country burn in flames, if you have never seen things you have known your entire life, gone in a blink of an eye, if you happen to be one of those lucky ones, you need to retell this story. There is a valorous land in Eastern Europe, filled with people like you and me, and they endure days of tribulation and fight for their freedom to exist. Every man and woman, young or old, fought for their svoboda, freedom. These are the promises we have to keep, lest the world forget Ukraine. As we wrap up this episode of Finding Humans in Tech, remember this: behind every line of code, every groundbreaking innovation, and every bold idea is a human story, full of passion, resilience, and the courage to dream. The stories remind us that technology isn't just about machines, it's about the heartbeats that make them meaningful. Subscribe, like, and share our channel, and keep on joining us in this journey of discovery and connection. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep innovating, and always keep shining the light. Farewell, my friend.